What the is that guy doing? Oh, welcome to Car Talks. So, for today's Car Talks, I would like to give you a personal story and talk to you about the topics that I've talked about in the past, that how I'm and my team that I'm on are applying them. So to give you some backstory, I work at a company called Genomic Health in Redwood City, California. And I am on a team, a small team of, four of us now, that we're the automation team, or we're called the DevOps team, even though we don't like it. But anyway, we are on a DevOps team, and basically we are in charge of automating test deployments and deployments to production. So, the typical DevOps thing. One thing I wanted to focus on in this Car Talks is how we recently started changing the way we do deployments. So previously, when we used to do deployments, we used a custom-built tool that we call environment orchestration. And environment orchestration is a bunch of PowerShell modules. Really, that's all it is. We don't use any other tools, or we didn't use any other tools whatsoever than just PowerShell. That was everything from automating the VM creation, operating system tweaks, SQL Server, IIS server installs, configuration, all the infrastructure stuff. Plus, this is also creating, doing the actual application deployments. So we would take a build output from TFS and deploy it to whatever environment that the developer needed. This is all done in PowerShell. And one thing that we really wanted to change was that everything was tied to a release of our own internal tool. So this tool that we call environment orchestration, we versioned it just like any other software application there is. So right now we're at EO 523, I think. And what that did was we were tying all the new functionality for the app for all these different applications, tweaks that need to happen, and all this stuff. That was all hard-coded in the EO project itself. And before we could release any kind of new functionality, give a developer the chance to, let's say, tweak a website or provision a new database or whatever, we had to actually go into PowerShell and change that, and then wait for the next release. The developer would have to wait for the next release, so we'd go through all our testing. So we were developers developing a tool when we really didn't have to. I'm sure if a lot of you guys are in the DevOps space, there's all kinds of tools to do this sort of thing. So this is sort of the story of how we were trying to evolve and progress in the way that we do these deployments. So I talked a lot about infrastructure as code or configuration as code in the past and previous Car Talks. But to give you a brief intro on that, configuration as code is essentially taking some kind of document, some kind of file, plain text file with either JSON, XML, YAML, anything like this, very common with configuration management tools, and then using that as the input for code execution. So for a deployment example, let's say that you need to deploy a test environment of 3 VMs, 2 IIS servers, 1 SQL server, X number of databases, all the configuration items that it takes from taking that environment from absolutely nothing all the way up to a configured state. That's what would be in that document. Some tools call it a playbook, some tools call it a manifest, some tools call it a module. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's just simply a document lined up in a specific DSL or domain-specific language that outlines the state of what you want the environment or whatever deployment target you're pointing at to look like. We didn't have any of that before, but recently, which I blogged about before, or actually I did a car talk about doing what you want and moving ahead, and not caring about the short-term pain. That's sort of what it is. So I kind of took it upon myself to introduce a concept we call VNext, and VNext's whole point is to take all of that logic and all that code, what it takes that was pre-built in all those different PowerShell modules, and move all that stuff into what we call manifests. These are just JSON files. This is our own kind of custom solution. Eventually, I hope to get us to the point to where we can roll this into another configuration management tool. But for now, the biggest takeaway on this was we had so much stuff. We had almost 50,000 lines of PowerShell code, dozens and dozens of applications that all have these different configurations that we need. All that stuff was inside, all embedded in the PowerShell code. So the first step to break all that stuff out was develop some kind of manifest. So we have a specific schema that we follow, which is in JSON, and the JSON file is essentially has different nodes in it. So maybe we need to do a SQL Server with 3 databases. So we have a SQL Server node in the manifest, and we have database, and then attributes kind of underneath those. So name, the source, maybe if you want to back up the database from somewhere, or if you want to restore it from somewhere else, just create a new one. All those instructions are now in the manifest. And what we've seen the initial. We just started doing this probably a couple of months ago, but we're already seeing a lot of great advantages that I wanted to kind of talk to. The first was, what was originally designed was, we can easily tell at a glance everything what an app consists of, all the way down to the virtual machine that is going to be created. So we have a view of everything in one file that represented. Previously, to see what consists of an application, there was probably, there's been up to 12 different PowerShell functions that each called each other, called loop, it was like a big tree of PowerShell functions, and it would take probably an hour to figure out, okay, what is this thing doing? How is this application getting deployed, and what does it all consist of? Now, everything that consists of that application, that the state, all the configuration items are all located in a single manifest. So now we can just easily see what it's doing. That has some inherent benefits that I really didn't think about as well. Not only can we see everything, it's much more discoverable. We have a really good view of what's going on. We not only can do that, we can also easily change things, so we don't have to go figure out which function in PowerShell to change. We could change the attributes, just tweak things in a manifest, and then have what we call the EO engine execute the manifest, execute all the configuration items in that manifest, and then make it happen. That has a few different advantages. Number one is that we're getting out of the development business ourselves. So we were building a tool that we really didn't have to. There was all kinds of tools out there to do this already. And what this doing is this gets all of the changes before the engine itself, the code to actually create a VM or install a SQL Server or restore a database. All that code's always going to be the same. That's what we call the library functions. The functions that would always change would be the higher level functions we call the automation and orchestration functions. Those were the ones that always change because developers, the apps change. They need different changes to test environments. They need to be doing different changes to production and that sort of thing. So that's eliminating all that and putting all that code in this manifest, so we don't have to version an entirely new version, or we don't have to create an entirely new version of our environment orchestration product to be able to give the value to the developers right away. We can just make the change in the manifest and be done. That's another good thing. Another good thing that I recently discovered that I really didn't think of after I tried to design this out was that having everything in a manifest allows you to explain to others what you're doing. So to give you an example for that, we previously we would work with the various development teams and QE, and we would have to kind of explain to them. Okay, they would ask, well, what are you doing? And I need to add this, or how are you doing this? And we would have to go down through the code and say, well, I'm setting this configuration value only when this state exists, or I'm setting this key. And it was just really hard to explain what we were doing because it was so obscured in all that code that we couldn't really tell without actually reading down through the code. And even if we wanted to, we could give the various teams our PowerShell code, and we're not going to expect, and we shouldn't expect other people to read our code. Now, whenever we have all that logic and all those instructions to make an application or to make a test environment or whatever it is in this manifest, we simply send the manifest to them and say, look, here's everything, here's the state of your application or your test environment as we see it today. What do you think? And now at this point, since the manifest is human readable, I mean, you don't even have to be a developer to understand this code, that they can go through and say, looks like you're copying this file. There's a file resource that we have, and a source and a destination. We have the source and the destination inside of this package manifest that we call it. And they can say, well, it looks like you're taking from this source. We need to change that. And it really, instead of telling us to change it, they just go ahead and change it themselves, send it back, and we can just run it again. And it really cuts down on all that back and forth as well. That's kind of the phase one of how we're doing our configuration as code concept. The next phase is going to be actually taking these manifests, these package manifests. We call all these things packages now that we do. And we're taking these manifests and going to be putting them directly into the builds, the TFS builds themselves. And we're not even going to be in the picture whatsoever. So once we have a manifest that's easily readable, that we can then put inside of each of the application builds themselves, and then allow the developer to change whatever they need, add resources, remove stuff, whatever they need to change about their test environment that they need, the application how it needs to be deployed. That's all going to be inside of the build for the manifest, completely removing us. When that build kicks off, these developers, they currently have a self-service portal, a machine that they go to, and they can just say, install EO package foo, and then what the engine does, it looks for a manifest with a particular name inside of that build drop location, takes that, reads it, and then executes everything in there. So that completely eliminates us from the picture altogether. So, I mean, in the end, this concept, it's been a struggle getting this kind of mindset, communicating this new kind of way of doing things. And it's been a big struggle extracting all that stuff out of a bunch of code in a whole lot of different places. But what we found, it's only been a couple months, and we've been seeing some big benefits so far. Idempotency was another one that I forgot to mention. So we've been building these to where they're idempotent. We can run them as many times as you want. Previously, if you wanted to create a VM, you'd have to create the VM. It failed somewhere, completely remove it, create it again, remove it, create it again. That's another thing we added in there. But I do intend to create a pretty extensive blog post on this at some point in time. But we've been so busy with other things, and I've got all my other side projects, as you may know. But yeah. So in the end, really, configuration as code. If you are in DevOps, if you're doing deployments, even if you're an IT professional, if you are deploying infrastructure at any point in time, any way whatsoever, this configuration as code concept, having some kind of manifest that represents a particular state, whether it be a Puppet module, anything in Salt, a Chef, Ansible playbook, all these technologies really cut down significantly on a whole lot of different things. And from our experience so far, it's been a big win for our team.